Marcus King's hands were covered in blood, a dying cop's blood, and the sirens screaming in the distance meant one thing. He had about 90 seconds before everything he'd built for his daughter came crashing down. But let's back up 3 hours. The wrench slipped from Marcus's oil-stained fingers, clattering against the concrete floor of Joe's auto repair. He glanced at the clock, 8:47 p.m., another late shift, another day of keeping his head down and his hands busy. That's what 42 looked like for him now. Grease under his fingernails, an aching back, and a 12-year-old daughter waiting at home with microwaved leftovers. "Yo, Marcus, you heading out?" Jimmy called from the front office, keys jangling in his hand. Marcus wiped his hands on an already dirty rag. "Yeah, man. Nia's got a science project due tomorrow. Still needs poster board." Jimmy laughed, shaking his head. "Man, I don't know how you do it. Single dad life? That's a different kind of tough." "You do what you gotta do," Marcus replied, his voice flat. He didn't mention that what you gotta do used to mean saving lives in the back of an ambulance, running into danger while everyone else ran out. That was before Lisa, before the funeral with the flag and the 21-gun salute that made Nia cover her ears and cry into his chest. The drive home took him through the industrial district, a stretch of road most people avoided after dark. Abandoned warehouses lined both sides, their broken windows like hollow eyes watching the empty street. Marcus kept his truck at a steady 55, his mind already on Nia's project, on whether they had glue sticks at home, on anything except the memories that liked to creep in during quiet drives. That's when he saw the lights, red and blue, flashing weakly through the rain that had started to fall. A patrol car, but something was wrong. The lights flickered irregularly, and the car itself sat at an odd angle off the shoulder of the road, like he'd been shoved there by something violent. Marcus's foot moved toward the brake pedal, then hesitated. Not your problem. Not anymore. He'd made that promise to himself 5 years ago, standing in front of Lisa's casket. No more emergencies, no more bleeding strangers. No more risking everything for a system that didn't even see him as human half the time. Just work, home, and Nia. That was the deal. But his truck was already slowing down. "Damn it," Marcus muttered, pulling onto the shoulder about 50 feet behind the patrol car. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against his windshield. Through the water-streaked glass, he could make out the shape of someone lying on the pavement next to the overturned vehicle. He sat there for a long moment, engine idling, windshield wipers squeaking back and forth. Every instinct he'd spent 5 years suppressing was suddenly screaming at him. The way the body wasn't moving, the dark pool spreading out from underneath. The complete absence of any other cars, any other help. "This is stupid," he said aloud. "This is so stupid." He grabbed his phone, dialed 911, and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit him immediately, soaking through his work shirt as he jogged toward the overturned car. Up close, it was worse than he'd thought. The patrol car had flipped onto its driver's side, the roof crumpled inward. Glass and twisted metal littered the road, and there, sprawled on the wet pavement, was a young woman in a police uniform. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his hands already moving with muscle memory he'd tried to forget. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, brown eyes, unfocused and glassy with shock. She couldn't have been more than 25. Blood soaked the right side of her uniform, spreading from a wound somewhere beneath her tactical vest. Okay, stay with me," Marcus said, his voice automatically shifting into the calm, authoritative tone he'd used 1,000 times before. "I'm Marcus. I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name?" "Ruby," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Officer Ruby Carter." Marcus's hands were already assessing her injuries, checking her pulse, looking for the source of the bleeding. Training he'd tried to bury came flooding back ABCs. Assess, stabilize, treat. The gunshot wound was in her right side, just below the rib cage. Entry wound, no visible exit. She was losing blood fast. "Ruby, listen to me. You've been shot. I need to put pressure on this wound, and it's going to hurt like hell, but I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that for me?" She nodded weakly, and Marcus pressed his hands against the wound. Ruby's scream cut through the sound of the rain, but he didn't let up. Couldn't let up. The bleeding had to stop, or she'd be dead in minutes. I know, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. You're doing great, Ruby. Just keep breathing. Keep talking to me. What happened here? Ruby's breath came in short, painful gasps. Was chasing suspects. Drug operation. They shot out my tires. Car flipped. Where are the suspects now? Gone. Drove off. Before I could. Marcus glanced around the deserted road. Rain, darkness, and no sign of another vehicle. Just him, a dying cop, and the smell of gasoline getting stronger by the second. Gasoline. His eyes snapped to the overturned patrol car. A dark liquid was pooling beneath it, mixing with the rainwater and blood. Fuel leak, with the electrical system potentially still active, with sparks from the crash. Ruby, we need to move. Right now. Can't. Hurts too much. I know it hurts, but if we stay here, we're both dead. That car could blow any second. He looked down at her, at this young woman who'd probably joined the force with the same idealism Lisa had, who probably had parents waiting for her to come home safe, who'd done nothing wrong except try to stop some drug dealers on a rainy night. Not your problem, the voice in his head reminded him. Call it in. Let the professionals handle it. But his hands were already sliding under her shoulders, preparing to lift. On 3, he said. 1, 2. He lifted Ruby off the ground. She cried out in pain, her body going rigid, but Marcus held firm, carrying her away from the wrecked patrol car. 20 feet. 30. He laid her down on the grass on the far side of the road, immediately reapplying pressure to her wound. That's when the headlights appeared in the distance, 2 sets of them, approaching fast. Relief flooded through Marcus. Help was here. Ruby would make it. He could fade back, let the professionals take over, get home to Nia, and forget this ever happened. But as the cars screeched to a stop and their doors flew open, Marcus saw the expressions on the officers' faces as they took in the scene. A black man, covered in blood, kneeling over their injured colleague on a dark road in the middle of Captain Nowhere, and he realized his night was about to get much, much worse. The first officer out, a white man in his 50s with a weather-beaten face, had his hand on his weapon. Step away from the officer. Now. Marcus's blood ran cold. He knew that tone. He'd heard it before, in a dozen different situations where his skin color made him a threat before anyone bothered with facts. I'm helping her, Marcus said, keeping his voice calm, his hands visible and pressing against Ruby's wound. She's been shot. She's losing blood fast. I called 911. I said, step away. The officer's hand tightened on his weapon. Ruby's eyes opened slightly. No, he saved. But her voice was too weak, swallowed by the rain and the sound of more sirens approaching. A second officer, younger, black, with calculating eyes, moved closer, his hand also near his weapon. Sir, I need you to remove your hands from Officer Carter and step back. If I remove my hands, she bleeds out in 3 minutes, Marcus said, his jaw tight. I'm a former paramedic. I know what I'm doing. Former paramedic? The older officer's voice dripped with skepticism. What are you doing out here? Driving home from work. I saw the car. I stopped to help. Convenient. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Marcus felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, the same anger he'd felt every time he'd been pulled over for no reason, every time he'd been followed in stores, every time his credentials had been questioned, despite years of saving lives. But anger wouldn't save Ruby, and anger, he'd learned the hard way, could get him killed. Look, Marcus said, forcing his voice to stay level. We can sort out your questions later. Right now, this officer needs emergency medical attention. The wound needs to be packed properly, and she needs fluids. There's a trauma kit in that patrol car if it's not damaged. You know a lot about trauma care, the older officer said. Yeah, I do. More cars. Arrived 3 more patrol cars and finally, an ambulance. Marcus saw the EMTs jumping out, and something in his chest loosened slightly. Professional help. People who would focus on saving Ruby instead of interrogating him. But the officers weren't moving. They formed a semicircle around him and Ruby, their body language screaming suspicion. One of them, a woman in plain clothes, who Marcus guessed was a detective, knelt down across from him. "Detective Harper," she said, her eyes fixed on Marcus's hands. "How long have you been applying pressure?" "About 5 minutes. Entry wound, lower right torso. No exit wound that I can find. She's lost a lot of blood. She needs—" "I know what she needs." Harper cut him off. She nodded to the EMTs, who moved in quickly. "Sir, you can let go now." Marcus carefully removed his hands as the EMTs took over. Ruby's blood covered his palms, dark and slick. He stood up slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening, another skill he'd learned long before his paramedic training. "I'm going to need to see some ID," the older officer said. Marcus reached for his back pocket, then stopped. "I'm reaching for my wallet. It's in my back right pocket." Slowly. He'd done this dance before. Move slow. Announce everything. Don't give them any excuse. He pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. "Marcus King," the officer read aloud. "Address checks out for this area. Says here you're 42. That's right. And you just happened to be driving by." "I work at Joe's Auto Repair on Madison. I was heading home." "At 9 o'clock at night?" "Late shift." Detective Harper was walking around the scene, her flashlight playing over the overturned patrol car, the blood on the pavement, the position of Marcus's truck. She was reconstructing what happened, Marcus realized, trying to figure out if his story matched the physical evidence. Good. Let her. The evidence would back him up. "Detective," one of the younger officers called out. Harper jogged over to the patrol car, where the officer was pointing at something. They had a brief, hushed conversation, then Harper walked back. She looked at Marcus differently now. Still suspicious, but with a new edge of curiosity. "Mr. King, can you tell me what you touched on or around the vehicle?" "Just Officer Carter. I assessed her injuries and moved her away from the vehicle because of the fuel leak." "You didn't touch the vehicle itself? Didn't reach inside?" "No. Why?" Harper exchanged a glance with the older officer. "Officer Carter's duty weapon is missing from its holster. So is her radio." The implication hit Marcus like a physical blow. They thought he'd taken them. They thought he'd disarmed an injured cop. "I didn't touch anything except her," Marcus said, his voice hardening despite his best efforts to stay calm. "When I found her, she didn't have a weapon. The people who shot her probably took it." "The people who shot her," Harper repeated. "Did you see them?" "No. She told me she was chasing suspects from a drug operation. They shot out her tires and her car flipped. They left before I got here." "Convenient," the older officer said again. That word. That goddamn word. Marcus felt his hands curling into fists and forced them to relax. Getting angry would only confirm whatever they already believed about him. He'd seen it happen to other black men. Hell, he'd lived it himself enough times. The script was always the same. Suspicion, escalation, tragedy. "Detective." The EMT supervising Ruby's care was waving Harper over. Marcus watched as they conferred, the EMT gesturing at Ruby, then at the ground where Marcus had been treating her. Harper came back, her expression slightly less hostile. "The EMT says Officer Carter received expert-level trauma care. Says whoever treated her knew exactly what they were doing and probably saved her life." "I told you, I'm a former paramedic." "Former," Harper emphasized. Why former? There it was, the question that would make them check his background. The question that would lead them to Lisa, to the shooting, to all the reasons Marcus had walked away from the life of saving people. Before Marcus could answer, the patrol car suddenly groaned, a sound of metal shifting under stress. Everyone turned. "Everyone back!" Marcus shouted. "The fuel leak!" The explosion cut off his words. The patrol car erupted in a massive fireball, the blast wave hitting Marcus like a wall. He was thrown backward, his ears ringing, his vision flashing white. Heat rolled over him, so intense he thought his skin might blister. When his vision cleared, he was lying on his back in the wet grass, rain falling on his face. His ears felt stuffed with cotton, and every sound seemed far away. He pushed himself up, his body moving on autopilot, checking himself for injuries. Nothing serious, some burns on his arms maybe. His shirt was singed, but he was alive. The patrol car was now a roaring inferno, lighting up the rainy night like a hellish beacon. The officers who'd been standing near it were on the ground, some struggling to their feet. Marcus saw Detective Harper pulling the older officer away from the flames, and there, in an ambulance with its back doors still open, was Ruby. The EMTs had gotten her inside just before the explosion. She was staring out at the burning wreck, her face pale in the emergency lighting. She was alive. That's what mattered. Marcus stood up fully, his legs shaky. More sirens wailed in the distance, fire trucks this time. The scene was chaos now. Officers shouting, radios crackling, the fire sending thick black smoke into the rain-filled sky. No one was looking at Marcus anymore. No one was questioning him or watching his hands or implying he'd stolen a cop's weapon. He could walk back to his truck right now. He could drive away, and in the confusion, maybe no one would even notice. He could go home to Nia, help her with her science project, and pretend this night never happened. His keys were in his pocket. His truck was right there, but his feet didn't move. Because Ruby was being loaded into the ambulance, and the EMT was shaking his head, and Marcus knew that look. He'd worn that look himself, years ago, when a patient was critical and the hospital was still 15 minutes away. Detective Harper appeared beside him, her jacket scorched, her face smudged with soot. "Mr. King, I need you to come to the station to give a statement." It wasn't a request. Marcus looked at her, then at the ambulance pulling away with Ruby inside, lights and sirens screaming into the night. "Am I under arrest?" "No, but we have a lot of questions. I have to call my daughter. She's waiting for me at home." Harper studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Make your call. Then you're riding with me." The fluorescent lights in the police station interrogation room hummed with a frequency that made Marcus's head ache. Or maybe that was from the explosion. Either way, he'd been sitting in this windowless box for 40 minutes, watching his coffee go cold, while Detective Harper and a stone-faced officer named Reeves took turns asking him the same questions in slightly different ways. "So you just happened to be driving through that area?" Reeves said for the third time. His arms were crossed, his jaw set in a way that said he'd already made up his mind about Marcus. "I already told you. I work late shifts. That's my route home. Through the industrial district, after 9 p.m.? It's 10 minutes faster than the highway." Harper leaned forward, her elbows on the metal table. She'd cleaned the soot off her face, but her jacket still smelled like smoke. "Mr. King, we ran your background. You were a paramedic for 8 years, Army medic before that. Exemplary record, multiple commendations." Marcus said nothing. He knew where this was going. "And then you quit," Harper continued. "Just walked away from it all 5 years ago. Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Personal reasons. Your wife was Lisa King," Reeves said, pulling out a file. "Officer Lisa King, killed in the line of duty during a drug bust that went bad. Gang-related shooting." Marcus's hands clenched under the table, but his face remained still. "I don't see what that has to do with tonight." "Don't you?" Reeves leaned back in his chair. "Your wife was killed by gang members. Officer Carter was investigating a gang operation when she was attacked. That's one hell of a coincidence. You think I had something to do with shooting her?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. "I think it's interesting that you were there. That you were the only witness. That you knew exactly what to do to keep her alive but not alive enough to talk clearly about what happened." The accusation was so absurd that Marcus almost laughed. Almost. But he'd learned long ago that laughing at cops who suspected you of something was a good way to escalate a bad situation. "Detective Harper," Marcus said, focusing on her instead of Reeves. "Your EMT already confirmed that Officer Carter received professional-level trauma care. If I wanted her dead, I could have done nothing. I could have just kept driving. She would have bled out in 5 minutes. Or you could have wanted to look like a hero," Reeves shot back. "Play the Good Samaritan. Make sure you're seen as the guy who saved a cop instead of what?" Marcus's voice rose despite his best efforts to stay calm. "Instead of a black man who must have been involved somehow? Is that where you're going with this?" "Nobody said anything about race," Reeves said. "You didn't have to." Harper held up a hand. "Mr. King, Officer Reeves is just trying to understand the full picture. You have to admit, your presence at the scene raises questions." "My presence?" Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I stopped to help a dying woman. I used skills I learned serving my country and working as a paramedic to save her life. And now I'm sitting here being interrogated like I'm a suspect instead of—" The door opened. A tall black woman in her 50s strode in, wearing a police captain's uniform. She had sharp eyes that took in the scene immediately. Marcus standing, Reeves looking defensive, Harper caught somewhere between them. "Detective Harper, Officer Reeves, step outside," the woman said. Her voice carried absolute authority. "Captain Pierce, we're in the middle of—" Reeves started. "Outside. Now." They left. The captain closed the door and studied Marcus for a long moment. "Sit down, Mr. King." Marcus sat, his body still tense with barely controlled anger. Captain Pierce pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "I'm Captain Olivia Pierce. I oversee this precinct, and I owe you an apology." That wasn't what Marcus had expected. "An apology? My officers treated you like a suspect when you should have been treated like a witness, like someone who saved one of our own." She folded her hands on the table. "I've read your file, Mr. King. Army medic, 2 tours, Purple Heart, paramedic for 8 years, dozens of commendations. Until 5 years ago, when you walked away from all of it. You know why I walked away. I do. And I knew your wife. Lisa was a good cop, one of the best. Her death was a tragedy." Pierce's voice softened slightly. "I can't imagine what that was like for you. Losing her, raising your daughter alone." Marcus said nothing. He didn't trust his voice. "But tonight," Pierce continued, "you didn't walk away. You could have. You could have driven past that scene and gone home to your daughter. But you didn't. You stopped. You saved Officer Carter's life. And according to the EMTs, you did it under conditions that would have challenged even experienced trauma surgeons. I just did what needed to be done. That's what heroes always say." Pierce pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward Marcus. "This is Officer Ruby Carter, 24 years old, been on the force for 2 years. She graduated top of her class from the academy. Her mother's a nurse. Her father's a teacher. She wanted to be a cop because she believed she could make a difference." The photo showed Ruby in her dress uniform, smiling at the camera. Young, hopeful, alive. "The hospital just called," Pierce said quietly. "Ruby's stable. She's going to need surgery, but she's going to make it. Because of you." Marcus stared at the photo, something tight in his chest loosening slightly. "You're free to go, Mr. King," Pierce said, standing up. "You're not a suspect. You never should have been treated like one." She walked to the door but didn't open it. "But I'd like to ask you something first. This city needs people like you, people who don't panic, people who know how to save lives under pressure. My officers, they're good people, but most of them have never been in a real life or death situation. They don't know what it's like to hold someone's life in their hands. I'm not a cop, Captain. I'm not asking you to be. But I am asking you to think about consulting for us, teaching my officers, tactical emergency medicine, how to handle trauma in the field, how to keep themselves and others alive until the paramedics arrive." Marcus shook his head. "I left that world behind. I know, and I'm not asking you to come back into it. I'm asking you to share what you know, to help make sure what happened to Lisa doesn't happen to someone else." Pierce handed him a card. "My number's on there. Think about it. Call me if you change your mind." She opened the door, leaving Marcus standing alone in the interrogation room, the card in his hand. The apartment was dark when Marcus arrived home. It was almost 4 in the morning he'd been gone for, nearly 7 hours. But there was a light on in the kitchen, and as Marcus opened the door, he found Nia sitting at the small table, her science project spread out in front of her, asleep with her head on her arms. Something in Marcus's chest cracked. He walked over quietly and touched her shoulder. "Baby girl, wake up." Nia stirred, her eyes opening slowly. Then she saw him and sat up straight. "Dad, I was so worried. You said you'd be home hours ago, and then you called and said you had to go to the police station, and—" She stopped, her eyes widening as she took in his appearance. His shirt was torn and singed. His arms had angry red marks from the heat of the explosion. He was covered in soot and dried blood. "Dad, what happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," Marcus said quickly, pulling her into a hug. "I'm fine. I helped someone tonight. Someone who needed help." Nia pulled back and looked up at him, her eyes, Lisa's eyes, searching his face. Was it bad? Marcus thought about Ruby lying on that pavement, bleeding out. He thought about the explosion, the interrogation room, Captain Pierce's offer. Yeah, he said quietly. It was bad, but she's going to be okay. Because of you. Marcus nodded slowly. Nia hugged him again, tighter this time. Mom would be proud. Those 4 words hit Marcus harder than the explosion had. He closed his eyes, holding his daughter, and felt something shift inside him. Something he'd kept locked away for 5 years, trying to protect himself, trying to protect her. Come on, he said finally, his voice rough. Let's get this project done before you have to go to school. They worked together for the next 2 hours, cutting poster board and gluing photographs, talking about ecosystems and food chains. Normal things, safe things. But Marcus's mind kept drifting back to the interrogation room, to Captain Pierce's words. This city needs people like you. When Nia finally went to bed, exhausted but happy with her completed project, Marcus sat alone in the kitchen. Captain Pierce's card lay on the table in front of him. He picked it up, turned it over in his fingers, read the number printed there. He thought about Ruby, about that moment when she'd looked up at him and whispered, "You saved me." Why? He thought about Lisa, about the last time he'd seen her in her uniform, kissing him goodbye before her shift, about the phone call he'd gotten 6 hours later that had shattered his world into pieces he was still trying to put back together. He thought about Nia, about the way she'd said, "Mom would be proud," with such absolute certainty, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Marcus set the card back on the table and went to bed. 3 days passed. Marcus went to work, came home, helped Nia with homework, made dinner, watched TV. His routine, his safe, predictable routine that kept them both protected from the dangerous world he'd left behind. But the news kept showing Ruby's story. Every channel, every broadcast. Local officer in critical condition after ambush. Police search for suspects in officer shooting. And the one that made Marcus change the channel immediately, hero saves cop's life. He wasn't a hero. Heroes didn't walk away from their calling. Heroes didn't spend 5 years hiding from the world, afraid to use the skills that could save lives. On the 4th day, his phone rang while he was under a Ford F-150, replacing the transmission. Unknown number. "Marcus King," he answered, wiping grease on his coveralls. "Mr. King, this is Captain Pierce. Do you have a few minutes?" Marcus glanced at Jimmy, who was working on a Honda 2 bays over. "Yeah, what's up?" "Officer Carter woke up this morning. She's going to make a full recovery." Pierce paused, and Marcus heard something in her voice, something careful, deliberate. "She's been asking for you." Marcus stood there in the garage, grease on his hands. The phone pressed to his ear. "That's good. I'm glad she's okay. She wants to thank you. And honestly, Mr. King, I think you should hear what she has to say. About the night you found her. About what she remembers." Something in Pierce's tone made Marcus's stomach tighten. "What did she remember?" "She said something interesting. She said the men who ambushed her, the gang members, they mentioned your wife's name." Everything stopped. The sounds of the garage faded away. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Lisa King. They mentioned her specifically. Ruby heard them clearly, even though she was injured. They said something about another king going down." Pierce let that sink in for a moment. "Mr. King, Ruby thinks they might have been looking for you. She thinks you might be in danger." Marcus leaned against the F-150, his legs suddenly unsteady. 5 years. 5 years of keeping his head down, staying away from anything that might put Nia at risk. And now these people, the same people who'd killed Lisa, were looking for him? "I need you to come in," Pierce said. "Not as a suspect, as someone who might be targeted. We need to talk about what Ruby heard. About why these people might be coming after you. I have a daughter, Captain." Marcus's voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "If someone's targeting me, then we need to protect both of you. Please, come in. Let's figure this out together." Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about driving past that scene 4 nights ago, about how his life would be so much simpler if he'd just kept going, if he'd stayed invisible. "I'll be there in an hour," he said. The hospital room was private, with an armed officer stationed outside the door. Ruby was propped up in bed, her face pale but her eyes alert. IVs ran into both arms, and monitors beeped steadily beside her. But she was alive, breathing, healing, because Marcus had stopped. "You came," Ruby said when Marcus walked in with Captain Pierce. Her voice was weak but clear. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked, staying near the door. "Like I got shot and blown up, but the doctors tell me that's normal." She managed a weak smile. "They also said, you saved my life. Said I wouldn't have made it if you hadn't known exactly what to do." Marcus nodded but didn't say anything. "They said you carried me away from the car right before it exploded. Said we would have both died if we'd stayed there another 30 seconds. Ruby's eyes filled with tears. "Why did you do it? You didn't know me. You could have just called 911 and left. I couldn't do that." "Why not?" Marcus thought about that question, about all the reasons he should have driven away, and the one reason he couldn't. Because someone needed help. "That's all the reason I needed." Ruby wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, careful of the IV. "Mr. King, I need to tell what I heard. Before they shot me. Before everything went black." Captain Pierce moved closer, her expression grave. "There were 3 of them," Ruby began, her voice getting stronger as she focused on the memory. "They forced me off the road with their vehicle, blocked me in. When my car flipped, I was trapped for a minute, trying to free myself. I could hear them outside, laughing. Then they came over to where I'd crawled out." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. "I was lying there, bleeding, trying to reach my radio. One of them, the leader, I think he bent down and looked at me. He had this smile, like he was enjoying it, and he said," Ruby's voice dropped. He said, "Tell Marcus King we're coming for him. Tell him Lisa's debt isn't paid. Tell him the Kings don't get to walk away." The room went silent, except for the steady beeping of the monitors. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Then he shot me," Ruby continued quietly. "Took my gun and my radio. Left me there to die. If you hadn't come along." "Lisa's debt," Marcus repeated slowly, his mind racing. "What debt? She didn't have any connection to these people, except trying to stop them." "That's what we need to figure out," Pierce said. She pulled out a tablet and opened a file. "Mr. King, I've been going through the case files on your wife's death. The gang responsible, the ones she was investigating when she was killed, they were never fully dismantled. We got some of the lower-level members, but the leaders went underground, changed their operation, laid low for years, and now they're back." Ruby spoke up from the bed. "The operation I was investigating, Captain, it's the same gang. I compared the patterns, the territory, the distribution methods. It's them. They've been quiet for 5 years, but they're making a big move now, expanding, getting aggressive. And for some reason," she looked at Marcus, "they see you as a threat." "I'm not a threat to anyone," Marcus said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't entirely true. "I'm a mechanic. I stay out of their way. I stay out of everyone's way." "Except you didn't," Pierce said. 4 nights ago, you stopped and saved a cop they were trying to kill. You kept their message from being delivered the way they wanted it delivered with Ruby dead, and you terrified. Now they know you're still out there, still capable, still someone who acts instead of running away." Marcus shook his head. "This doesn't make sense. Why would they care about me? I've been invisible for 5 years. "Maybe that's exactly why," Ruby said. "You walked away after Lisa died. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't testify at trials or give interviews or become a crusader. You just disappeared. Maybe they thought you were weak. Maybe they thought you were scared. And then you show up and save a cop's life like it's nothing, and suddenly they realize you're not weak. You're not scared. You're just someone who chose not to fight. Until now," Pierce added. "Now you've shown them what you're capable of, and that makes you dangerous." Marcus felt the walls closing in. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of for 5 years. This was why he'd walked away from everything, why he'd chosen to fix cars instead of saving lives. He couldn't protect Nia if he was involved in this world. He couldn't keep her safe if gang members knew his name, knew where he lived, knew she existed. "What do I do?" he asked quietly, looking at Pierce. "How do I protect my daughter?" Pierce and Ruby exchanged glances. "You let us help you," Pierce said. "We put protection on your apartment. We make sure Nia is safe, that you're both safe. We've already started the process." "And then what? I live looking over my shoulder forever? Nia grows up with police escorts? Or," Pierce said carefully, "you help us stop them. For good this time." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not a cop, Captain. I already told you that." "No, but you're someone they're afraid of now. Someone they think they need to eliminate, which means you're someone who can help us get to them." Pierce leaned forward. "Mr. King, Marcus, I'm not asking you to put on a badge or carry a gun. I'm asking you to do what you do best. Save lives. Train my officers to handle themselves in crisis situations. Help us plan operations that keep people alive instead of getting them killed. Use your skills to protect people, including your daughter." "You want to use me as bait? I want to give you a chance to end this," Pierce corrected. "To make sure they can't hurt you or Nia or anyone else. To finish what Lisa started." Marcus looked at Ruby, who was watching him with those earnest eyes. So young, so determined, so much like Lisa had been when she'd first joined the force, full of hope and belief that she could make a difference. "What Lisa started wasn't about revenge," Marcus said quietly. "It was about justice. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. That's why she became a cop. That's what she died for." "Then help us protect people," Ruby said. "Help us stop them before they hurt someone else's family. Before some other kid has to grow up without a parent because these monsters decided they were in the way." Marcus thought about Nia, about her sitting at the kitchen table waiting for him, worried, about the way she'd hugged him and said, "Mom would be proud," with such certainty, such love. He thought about the card Captain Pierce had given him, still sitting on his kitchen table after 3 days. He thought about Ruby, bleeding on that wet pavement, whispering, "Why did you save me?" Like she couldn't understand why anyone would care. And he thought about Lisa, smiling in her uniform, kissing him goodbye for the last time, telling him she loved him, telling him to take care of Nia if anything happened. "If anything happens, you keep living," she'd said that morning. "You keep being the man I fell in love with, the man who helps people. Promise me." He'd promised. And then he'd spent 5 years breaking that promise, hiding from the world, afraid to be that man again. "If I do this," Marcus said slowly, his voice steady now, "I need guarantees. Nia's safety comes first. Always. Whatever happens, whatever you need from me, she doesn't get dragged into this. She doesn't become a target." "Agreed," Pierce said immediately. "We'll have officers watching your building, plainclothes surveillance. She'll be safe. And I'm not a cop. I'm a consultant. I teach your people tactical medicine, I help with planning operations, but I don't carry a gun and I don't go into the field. I'm not an operator. I'm a teacher. That's reasonable. And when this is over, when we stop these people, when the threat is gone, I walk away. For good this time. No more cases, no more consulting, no more anything. I go back to being a mechanic and a father. That's the deal." Pierce nodded. "Deal." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump. "Then I'm in." Ruby smiled from her hospital bed, relief washing over her face. "Thank you, Marcus." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We haven't done anything except put targets on our backs." "The target was already there," Pierce said, standing. "Now we're just deciding to shoot back. There's a briefing in 2 hours at the precinct. I want you there. I want you to see the full scope of what we're dealing with, what they're planning." As Marcus followed Captain Pierce out of the hospital room, leaving Ruby to rest, he felt that familiar weight settling back onto his shoulders. The weight of responsibility, of lives depending on his decisions, of stepping back into a world he'd sworn he'd left behind forever. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't running toward danger for strangers or for glory or because it was his job. This time, he was protecting his daughter. He was honoring his wife's memory. He was keeping a promise he'd made 5 years ago to keep living, to keep being the man who helps people. And that, Marcus thought, as he walked out into the bright afternoon sun, made all the difference in the world. The briefing room at the precinct was packed. 20 officers, detectives, and tactical unit members filled the chairs, their conversations dying down as Captain Pierce walked to the front with Marcus beside her. The looks Marcus received ranged from curious to skeptical to outright hostile. He recognized Officer Reeves in the back row, arms crossed, jaw tight. Pierce didn't waste time. Listen up. This is Marcus King. Some of you already know who he is. He's the man who saved Officer Carter's life 4 nights ago. What you might not know is that he's former Army medic, 2 tours, and worked as a paramedic for 8 years before that. He's going to be consulting with us on tactical emergency medicine. A hand went up a young officer with a crew cut. With all due respect, Captain, we have paramedics. Why do we need a consultant? Because your paramedics aren't always there when you need them, Marcus said before Pierce could answer. His voice was calm, authoritative. How many of you have been first on scene to a shooting, a stabbing, a traffic accident? About half the hands in the room went up. And how many of you felt completely prepared to handle the medical emergency until the ambulance arrived? The hands went down. Marcus saw the recognition in their eyes, that moment of panic when you realize someone's life is in your hands and you don't know what to do. That's what I'm here for, Marcus continued. Not to replace paramedics. To make sure you can keep someone alive until the paramedics get there. 5 minutes can mean the difference between life and death. I'm here to teach you what to do with those 5 minutes. Why should we trust you? Reeves called out from the back. You walked away from all this 5 years ago. Why come back now? Marcus met his gaze steadily. Because the same people who killed my wife are now targeting me and my daughter. Because Officer Carter almost died delivering their message. Because I made a promise to someone I loved that I'd keep helping people, and I've been breaking that promise for 5 years. He paused. And because I'm tired of running. The room went quiet. Pierce pulled up a map on the large screen behind her. The gang we're dealing with calls themselves the Scorpions. 5 years ago, they controlled 3 neighborhoods on the south side. Officer Lisa King was investigating their drug distribution network when she was killed. We arrested several members, but the leaders, Carlos Mendez and his brother Rafael, went underground. She clicked to the next slide, showing surveillance photos of 2 men. Carlos was in his 40s, hard-faced with prison tattoos covering his arms. Rafael was younger, leaner, with cold eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. They've been quiet for 5 years, Pierce continued, building their operation, making connections, waiting. Now they're making their move. They've expanded to 7 neighborhoods. They're pushing out the other gangs, consolidating power, and they're being ruthless about it. Another click, crime scene photos. Marcus felt his stomach turn bodies, blood, the aftermath of violence he'd hoped never to see again. 3 murders in the last month, all connected to the Scorpions, Pierce said. 2 rival gang members and 1 civilian who witnessed a deal. They're sending a message. Nobody crosses them. Nobody talks. Nobody gets in their way. And now they're after Marcus. Ruby's voice came from the doorway. She was in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse, against what were clearly doctor's orders. Her face was pale but determined. Because I'm still alive. Because their message didn't get delivered. Because Marcus showed them that someone still has the courage to stand against them. Officer Carter, you should be in bed, Pierce said, but there was admiration in her voice. I'll rest when we catch these bastards. Ruby wheeled herself to the front. I heard them talking before they shot me. They're planning something big. An expansion into the east side, taking over territory from the Dragons. They think nobody can stop them. How do we know Marcus isn't connected to them? Reeves stood up, his voice challenging. His wife investigated them. He shows up right when Carter gets shot. Maybe he's working with them. Maybe this is all a setup. Several officers shifted uncomfortably. Marcus saw the doubt in some of their faces, the same doubt he'd seen his entire life. The automatic suspicion that came with being a black man in spaces that didn't want him there. But before Marcus could respond, a voice cut through the tension. That's the dumbest thing I've heard all week, Reeves. Detective Harper stood up from her seat in the front row. I was there that night. I saw how King treated Officer Carter. I saw the trauma care he provided. I talked to the EMTs who said his fieldwork was some of the best they'd ever seen. And I checked his background Army medic with commendations for saving lives under fire. Paramedic who had a 98% save rate in critical cases. The man's a hero, and you're treating him like a suspect, Because you can't get past your own prejudice. Reeves's face reddened. I'm just asking questions. No, you're wasting everyone's time. Harper turned to the room. Anyone else have a problem with Mr. King being here? Because if you do, you can leave right now and explain to the captain why you'd rather let officers die than learn from someone who's forgotten more about emergency medicine than you'll ever know. Silence. Then, one by one, the officers shook their heads. Good, Pierce said. Then let's get to work. The next 2 weeks were intense. Marcus spent his days at the garage and his evenings at the precinct, teaching officers how to handle trauma situations. He started with the basics, how to assess injuries, control bleeding, recognize shock. Then he moved to more advanced techniques, chest seals for gunshot wounds, tourniquet application, emergency airways. The officers were skeptical at first. Marcus could feel their doubt, their resistance, but slowly, as they practiced on training dummies and heard his stories from the field, they began to trust him. To see past their preconceptions and recognize his expertise, Detective Harper became one of his strongest advocates. She attended every session, asked sharp questions, practiced until her hands were steady and sure. One evening, after the other officers had left, she approached Marcus. I owe you an apology, she said. That night, I should have shut down Reeves's questions immediately. I let my own doubts cloud my judgment. You were doing your job, Marcus said, packing up his training materials. My job is to find the truth, not assume the worst about people. Harper hesitated. Can I ask you something? Why did you really come back? Was it just about protecting your daughter? Marcus was quiet for a moment. My wife used to say that we all have a choice. We can use our gifts to help people, or we can waste them by hiding from the world. For 5 years, I was hiding, telling myself I was protecting Nia, but really I was just protecting myself from getting hurt again. He looked at Harper. Saving Ruby that night reminded me of who I used to be, who I promised Lisa I'd stay being. I guess I'm tired of breaking that promise. Harper nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. These officers, they need what you're teaching them. Last week, 2 of them responded to a stabbing. They used your techniques to control the bleeding and keep the victim stable. The doctors said he wouldn't have made it otherwise. Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. Yeah? You're saving lives again, Marcus, even if you're not in the field. Kay, at home, things were complicated. Marcus had told Nia about the threat, about why there were now plainclothes officers watching their building. She'd taken it better than he expected Lisa's daughter through and through, brave and resilient even when she was scared. Are you going to catch the bad guys? She asked one night over dinner. I'm going to help the police catch them, Marcus said carefully. I'm teaching the officers how to stay safe, how to help people who get hurt. Like you helped that cop. Officer Carter? Yeah, like that. Nia was quiet for a moment, pushing her rice around her plate. I'm scared, Dad. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. I know, baby girl. I'm scared too. But we're going to be okay. The police are watching out for us. And we're not. We're going to let these people control our lives. We're not going to hide. Is that what you were doing before? Hiding? The question hit Marcus like a punch. Yeah, I guess I was. Mom wouldn't have wanted that. No, she wouldn't have. Nia squeezed his hand. Then I'm glad you stopped. I'm glad you're helping people again, even if it's scary. 3 weeks after Marcus started consulting, Captain Pierce called an emergency briefing. Marcus arrived at the precinct to find the room buzzing with tension. Ruby was there out of her wheelchair now, moving slowly but steadily. Harper looked grim. Even Reeves seemed worried. We have intelligence that the Scorpions are planning a major operation, Pierce said without preamble. They're moving a large shipment of drugs through the city tomorrow night. We're talking millions of dollars worth of product. If this shipment gets through, they'll have the resources to completely dominate the south side and expand into the east. We're going to intercept it, Harper added. Hit them while they're vulnerable, arrest as many as we can, and seize the drugs. It's our best chance to cripple their operation. What about the Mendez brothers? Marcus asked. Will they be there? We think so. This shipment is too important for them to trust to underlings. Pierce looked around the room. This is going to be dangerous. They'll be armed and ready to defend that shipment with everything they have. which is why I want you all to review the trauma protocols Mr. King has taught you. If this goes bad, you need to be ready." After the briefing, Ruby pulled Marcus aside. "I want to be there tomorrow night," she said. "Ruby, you just got out of the hospital. I know, but I need to be there. These people tried to kill me. They're targeting you because I survived. I need to see this through." Marcus understood. He'd felt the same need 5 years ago, after Lisa died. The need to do something, anything, to make her death mean something. "Just be careful," he said. "Don't take any unnecessary risks." Ruby smiled. "That's funny, coming from the guy who carried me away from an exploding car." The next evening, Marcus sat in his apartment with Nia, trying to act normal while his mind raced. The operation was happening in 2 hours. Officers he'd trained were about to put their lives on the line, using techniques he'd taught them. If something went wrong, if someone died because he hadn't prepared them well enough. His phone rang. "Captain Pierce. Marcus, I need you to come to the staging area." "Captain, I told you, I'm not going into the field." "I know, but the tactical team wants you there as emergency medical support, just in case. You'd stay back from the action, but if an officer goes down, you'd be there to stabilize them until the ambulance arrives." Marcus looked at Nia, who was doing homework at the kitchen table. 2 plain clothes. Officers stationed outside their door. "I can't leave my daughter. The officers will stay with her." "Marcus, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. But you're the best trauma specialist we have. If something goes wrong, it means I didn't train them well enough. You trained them perfectly. But this is combat, Marcus. You know better than anyone that even perfect training can't eliminate all risk. Please." Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about Lisa, about the night she'd died, about how he'd gotten the call that she was down, and by the time he'd gotten to the hospital it was too late. About how he'd spent 5 years wishing he could have been there, wishing he could have done something. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and knelt beside Nia. "Baby girl, I have to go help with something. The officers will stay right here with you. You keep the door locked, and you don't open it for anyone except me. Understand?" Nia's eyes were wide, but she nodded. "Be careful, Dad." "I will. I love you." "I love you too." The staging area was an abandoned warehouse 3 blocks from where the Scorpions were supposed to make the drug transfer. Marcus arrived to find 40 officers gearing up tactical vests, weapons, communications equipment. The air was thick with tension and adrenaline. Pierce met him at the door. "Thank you for coming. Where do you want me?" "Command post, here in the warehouse. You'll monitor the operation on radio. If anyone goes down, a unit will bring them back here, and you'll stabilize them. Ambulances will be staged 2 blocks away." Marcus nodded, his mind already shifting into medic mode. He checked the supplies, trauma kits, IV bags, chest seals, tourniquets. Everything he'd need to keep someone alive in those critical minutes before professional help arrived. Ruby came over, fully geared up despite her recent injuries. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Didn't expect to be here," Marcus admitted. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I've been ready since they shot me." She checked her vest. "Marcus, if something happens to me out there, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, I want you to know you gave me a second chance. A lot of people don't get that. Whatever happens tonight, I'm grateful." Before Marcus could respond, Pierce's voice came over the radio. "All units, we have visual confirmation. Multiple vehicles approaching the target location. Stand by." The warehouse went quiet. Everyone was listening, waiting. "Subjects are exiting vehicles. I count. 8. No. 10 individuals. Wait, we have the Mendez brothers. Confirmed Carlos and Rafael are on site." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. This was it. The people who'd killed Lisa, who'd threatened his daughter, who'd tried to kill Ruby, they were about to be taken down. "All units, on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute, execute, execute." The radio exploded, with noise, shouting, commands, the sound of vehicles moving. Marcus stood frozen, listening to the chaos, every muscle in his body tense. "Suspects are running, multiple subjects fleeing north. We have shots fired, shots fired. Officer down, we need medical at the east entrance." Marcus was already moving, grabbing his medical kit, running toward the exit. Pierce tried to stop him, but he pushed past her. I said I'd stay back, not that I'd let someone die while I waited. He ran out into the night, following the sound of gunfire. 2 tactical officers were carrying a third between them, blood streaming down his leg. Marcus met them halfway. Set him down, right here. They lowered the officer, a young man Marcus recognized from his training sessions. His name was Torres. He had a wife and a baby daughter. Marcus dropped to his knees beside him, his hands already assessing the wound. Gunshot to the upper thigh, arterial bleed. Torres's face was pale, his breathing rapid and shallow. Shock was setting in. "Torres, look at me," Marcus said, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos around them. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." He pulled out a tourniquet, positioned it high on Torres's leg, and began tightening it. Torres screamed, but Marcus didn't stop. The bleeding had to be controlled, or Torres would be dead in minutes. "I know it hurts. Stay with me. Talk to me about your daughter. What's her name?" "Sophia," Torres gasped. "She's 6 months old." 6 months. That's a beautiful age. You're going to get to see her grow up, Torres. You're going to teach her to walk, to ride a bike, to drive you crazy when she's a teenager. But you have to stay with me right now. Understand?" Torres nodded, his eyes focusing on Marcus's face. The tourniquet was in place. The bleeding slowed, stopped. Marcus quickly checked for other injuries, started an IV line, covered Torres with a thermal blanket to prevent shock. "Ambulance is en route." "One of," the tactical officers said. "ETA 2 minutes." "He'll make it," Marcus said, monitoring Torres's pulse. "He's stable." More gunfire in the distance. More shouting. Then Pierce's voice over the radio. "We have both Mendez brothers in custody. Repeat. Carlos and Rafael Mendez are in custody. Multiple suspects detained. Shipment secured." A cheer went up from the officers around Marcus. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. The ambulance arrived and Marcus briefed the paramedics quickly, professionally. They looked at his fieldwork and nodded with approval. "Nice job. You probably saved his life." As they loaded Torres into the ambulance, the young officer grabbed Marcus's hand. "Thank you. Thank you for everything." Marcus squeezed his hand. "Thank your training. You remembered to apply pressure until help arrived. That's what kept you alive." The aftermath was chaos, arrests, evidence collection, debriefings that lasted until dawn. But when the sun finally rose over the city, the Scorpions were finished. Carlos and Rafael Mendez were in custody, along with 17 other gang members. The drug shipment had been seized, and most importantly, only one officer had been injured, and he was going to make a full recovery. Captain Pierce found Marcus sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, exhausted but relieved. "You ran into an active firefight," she said. "Yeah. After specifically telling me you wouldn't go into the field." "Yeah. That was incredibly reckless and brave and stupid." Pierce sat down beside him. "It was also exactly what I hoped you'd do. You saved Torres's life, Marcus. The paramedics said he would have bled out if you hadn't gotten to him when you did." Marcus just nodded, too tired to feel proud or satisfied. He just felt grateful that everyone had made it home. "The Mendez brothers are talking," Pierce continued. "Trying to cut deals. They confirmed that they were targeting you because you saved Ruby. They saw you as a loose end, someone who could identify them, connect them to Lisa's murder. They wanted to eliminate that threat. And now they're going away for a very long time. Life sentences, probably multiple. It's over, Marcus. The threat to you and Nia, it's over." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling something heavy lift from his shoulders. Over. It was really over. "So you kept your end of the bargain," he said, "which means I get to keep mine. I walk away now, right? Back to being a mechanic and a dad?" Pierce was quiet for a moment. "Is that really what you want?" Marcus thought about the last 3 weeks, about teaching officers, seeing them learn, watching them apply those skills to save lives, about Torres grabbing his hand and saying thank you, about Ruby wheeling herself into that briefing room, determined to see justice done, about Harper apologizing for her doubts and becoming one of his strongest supporters. He thought about Lisa, about the promise he'd made to keep being the man who helps people, and he thought about Nia, saying, "Mom would be proud." "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I thought I wanted to go back to my quiet life. But that life, it wasn't really living. It was just existing, hiding from the world, hiding from who I really am. You're a teacher, Pierce said. That's who you really are. Someone who takes what he's learned through pain and experience and uses it to help others. That's a gift, Marcus, a rare one. I have a daughter to raise, I know, and part of raising her is showing her how to live a meaningful life, how to use your gifts, how to not let fear control your choices. Pierce stood up. I'm not asking you to come back full-time. I'm not asking you to put yourself in danger. I'm asking you to keep teaching, keep training officers, and when you're ready, maybe expand that training to civilians. Teach them basic emergency response, trauma care, how to help in a crisis. Become the person who makes sure more people have the skills to save lives when it matters. Marcus looked up at her. That's a lot of pressure, Captain. You've been handling pressure your whole life. This is just channeling it in a positive direction. She handed him a folder. This is a proposal for a community emergency response training program. We'd partner with the fire department, with hospitals, with schools. You'd design the curriculum, train the instructors, oversee the program. Make it your own. Marcus opened the folder, scanning the pages. It was ambitious. Training programs for officers, for first responders, for ordinary citizens. Creating a network of people who could respond effectively in emergencies, who could save lives until professional help arrived. It was exactly the kind of thing Lisa would have loved. Can I think about it? Marcus asked. Take all the time you need. But Marcus? Pierce smiled. You've already made your decision. You just need to accept it. 2 months later, Marcus stood in front of a classroom of 30 civilians, teachers, parents, store clerks, teenagers, regular people who wanted to learn how to help in an emergency. Nia sat in the front row, 13 now, watching her father with pride. My name is Marcus King, he said, and I'm going to teach you how to save a life. He started with the basics, just like he had with the police officers. How to recognize an emergency, how to stay calm, how to call for help. Then he moved into practical skills, CPR, bleeding control, recognizing shock. The students were eager, asking questions, practicing on the training dummies. Marcus watched them learn, saw the confidence growing in their eyes as they mastered each technique. During a break, Ruby came in now back to full duty, promoted to detective for her work on the Mendez case. She gave Marcus a coffee and watched the class for a moment. You're good at this, she said. It feels right, Marcus admitted. Like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Lisa would be proud. Marcus smiled. Yeah, she would. After class, as Marcus was packing up his materials, a middle-aged woman approached him. She looked nervous, her hands twisting together. Mr. King, I just wanted to thank you. My son was in a car accident last week. I was the first person there, and I was able to use what you taught us to control his bleeding until the ambulance arrived. The doctors said. They said I saved his life. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. You did that. You saved your son, because you taught me how. She grabbed his hands. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the knowledge to help him. After she left, Marcus stood alone in the classroom, feeling the weight and wonder of what he was building. This wasn't just about teaching techniques. It was about empowering people, giving them the tools to make a difference in the worst moments of their lives. It was about creating a prevalent community of everyday heroes. That evening, Marcus drove home with Nia. The city lights flickered past the windows, and in the rear-view mirror, Marcus saw the black bracelet hanging there, the one engraved with "Never Leave a Fallen." He'd put it there after the operation that took down the Mendez brothers, a reminder of where he'd been and where he was going. Dad? Nia said. Are you happy? Marcus thought about the question. About Lisa, about the 5 years he'd spent hiding, about Ruby and Torres and that woman whose son's life she'd saved, about the dozens of people he was training, empowering, preparing to be heroes in their own lives. Yeah, baby girl, he said. I think I am. Good, because you smile more now. You laugh more. You're like you used to be, before Mom died. Yeah. Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand. I'm not the same person I was then. I've got scars now, inside and outside. But I think I'm finally becoming the person Mom always believed I could be. Someone who uses his pain to help others. Someone who doesn't run away from the hard things. A hero, Nia said simply. No, just someone who refuses to leave people fallen when he has the power to help them stand. They pulled into their apartment complex. The plainclothes surveillance was gone now, no more threat, no more looking over their shoulders. Just life, normal and peaceful and full of possibility. As they walked to their door, Marcus looked back at his truck, at the bracelet hanging in the mirror. He thought about everything it represented: loss and love, pain and purpose, the journey from grief to grace. He thought about Lisa, about Ruby, about Torres and that woman's son, and all the lives that had been touched by the choice he'd made one rainy night to stop instead of driving past. And he thought about tomorrow, about the next class he'd teach, the next person he'd empower, the next life that might be saved because someone knew what to do in those critical 5 minutes. Marcus smiled, wrapped his arm around Nia's shoulders, and walked into their home. He was finally at peace. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power of choosing courage over fear, please take a moment to subscribe to Humanity Stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling us about a time when someone's courage changed your life, or when your courage changed someone else's, because we all have the power to be heroes in someone's story. We just have to choose not to drive past when someone needs help. Hit that like button, and remember, you never know when you'll be the person who makes the difference between life and death. Learn the skills, be prepared, be the hero someone needs.